we had a pretty large bang associated with the caution and warning now. Okay, as we have an apparent serious oxygen leak.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston, we've had a problem. He's in a roll and he can't stop it. Performing an evasive maneuver. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. I think we need to do a little more all-weather testing.
Welcome to space.
Hello, listener, and welcome to Failure to Launch, the space history podcast where we take you through all the mistakes, failures, and explosions that made modern space exploration possible. We are your hosts, Quinn, he, him.
Chris, he, him.
Ian, co-host, he, him.
And a name that Quinn cannot comment on, Chris, he, him.
And today, we're talking about Starfish Prime, or that time the US nuked space and fried Britain's first satellite, and Canada's first satellite, and the first communications satellite, and a full third of all satellites, and also maybe some astronauts. Or I should say almost an astronaut and almost a cosmonaut. There was a lot going on in the 60s.
Walter Mira not feeling so good.
And as you have heard, we have got a guest. Ian is a friend of the show and an electrical engineer with years of experience working on comm systems. He and I are going to be sharing the host seat today. I'm going to talk about some of the history and politics behind the Starfish Prime nuclear test, and Ian is going to cover the fallout and some of the casualties. Ian, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on. This is exciting. I am a little terrified.
We got a joint custody situation happening.
Yeah, you do get to pick a Chris at the end of this episode and go make your own sister podcast. Choose wisely.
Gonna get rid of them that quickly. So at the top, I do have to give a disclaimer here. I hate that I had to do it.
Awesome.
But it's the usual legal dance. My opinions are my own. I'm not going to be stating my employer. At least one of my coworkers is going to listen to this. Also, maybe my mom. Hi, Mom.
Hi there.
Anyway, my opinions are my own. I'm not at all pretending to speak on behalf of my employer. And additionally, I want to stress that any information that I will be providing about operation or design of modern satellite or terrestrial communication systems is going to be based solely upon publicly available information, established theory, other things like that. I'm not out here to violate any NDAs.
So no trade secrets on this show, all right, guys?
Hello, welcome to Breaking the NDA Hour.
That could be a fun show. We just invite people to, completely anonymously break their NDAs or attempt to break their NDAs while maintaining anonymity. So, this is a topic that I personally have been very excited for and our chance to cover, and which has been on our list ever since we talked about Operation Argus and Nicholas Christophilos, good old Nick Christ. The elevator repairman who wanted to hide America under a massive dome of lethal radiation.
Yeah, under the thermonuclear Snuggie.
I believe we said back then, Nick Christ is going to tuck you into safety.
Yeah.
Golden dome, glowing dome. We could absolutely convince Trump that we need to do the Christophilos effect immediately.
I don't know. Elon might have some opinions about that.
And while that episode mostly focused on Nick and the Christophilos effect, we did touch on space-based nuclear tests, and that is what we are going to be delving into here a little bit more. Like we said up top, I'm going to be covering the history up front, and then we're going to be passing it over to Ian to talk about just exactly what happens whenever you nuke space, and what happens to all of the satellites who are up there when you nuke space.
Nothing good.
Now, for sourcing, I mostly pulled the history from the books Dark Sun, The Making of the Hydrogen Bomb by Richard Rhodes, and Burning the Sky by Mark Wolverton. We also pulled some technical details from a few US military reports covering the test and its results, which, as always, you can find linked down below in the show notes.
Yeah, and I mean, more than that, I was pulling from every other source that I could possibly find. A lot of NASA docs, lot of, explicit like U.S. military documents, and then also trying to scrounge together whatever else I could find from assorted other agencies. Some of these are international collaborations, so documentation and navigating that is not so straightforward, but
I went looking and I was honestly surprised that I was not able to find much like Canadian or CSA stuff on Alouette 1, considering that our nation's first satellite got nuked. I figure there might have been some. Yeah, but like if you shoot someone and they got a bulletproof vest, they still get to be mad at you.
Well, I mean, so that's the interesting thing is like a lot of, lest I dive off into a rabbit hole here, one of the really interesting things was that I could find extensive, diagrams and technical discussion of a lot of the construction of these U.S. satellites, and even with the U.S.-British collab that we're going to talk about. But the Canadian stuff was shockingly opaque.
I'm willing to bet that's just because a lot of it was like in French and didn't show up in English language searches. In 1954, there were 16 nuclear tests worldwide. In 1955, there were 24. In 56, there were 33. 1957 saw the number rise to 55 total. And then it more than doubled to 116 in 1958, the second highest number of tests in a year in world history. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that the number of nuclear tests at that time was like going up exponentially. There did not appear to be any end in sight. And to the growing anti-nuclear movement, this was like a big problem. And back then, opposition to nuclear testing was very, very, very prevalent and popular. All of these tests that I've mentioned were also carried out by the US, USSR, and UK, which at the time were the only three nuclear powers.
Oh, holy fuck, I have to love. I'm getting a little bit ahead of it, but just that little gap.
We're going to talk about that gap and why France is just kind of like Charles de Gaulle is just flying. He's riding a nuke into that gap.
Like Major Kong.
Yeah. One thing I do find interesting, I was looking up the total numbers, is how much nuclear tests France has done in total. So like you can see there in that list, that also, as you've pointed out, that Ian, that list is missing Israel and South Africa. And basically, even though the UK was the third nuclear power, France did 4 times as many nuclear tests. I think they did something like 200 to the UK's 45. The US is ahead in total, and like Russia and the Soviet Union, I think around like 1,700, I want to say.
The one little blip at 1960 with
yeah, that's actually 3 tests. Yeah,
hilarious bit.
Now, these tests were also overwhelmingly conducted above ground, at high altitude or even in space, where the radioactive fallout could be carried by the wind or water. The thing that we are going to talk about today is the biggest space nuclear test. However, it's definitely not the first. Like Operation Argus, there are all of these different attempts by the US and the Soviet Union to like put nukes in space, which isn't illegal at the time because the Outer Space Treaty had not yet been made.
The Outer Space Treaty, I'm sorry, I'm not actually familiar with a lot of the like structure of these ongoing treaties. Could you enlighten me?
So the Outer Space Treaty is kind of like a grab bag treaty. It's signed in 1967. It kind of is still the like whenever people talk about international law with respect to space, it is almost entirely based on the Outer Space Treaty. So that is stuff like you cannot station nuclear weapons in space is one of the big things. And specifically, because of the tests that we're going to talk about today, that is one of the biggest points on it. And it also has stuff of like, can you claim ownership? Like during the moon race, there were legal fears of like, does putting an American flag on the moon mean that America owns the moon? So a lot of this stuff comes out of the Outer Space Treaty. And yeah, like I said, there's no like central thesis to it. It's kind of like a grab bag of a lot of countries around the world agreeing on how they would go about space. But there's also like, it also kind of ties in with like nuclear disarmament, and there's all kinds of various little like abortive attempts to ban nuclear tests along the way. And again, at the time, despite what you would think with like the Cold War going crazy and, like Curtis LeMay doing all of his stuff, and this propaganda, especially now that the space race is heating up after Sputnik in 1957, the public around the world is largely against nuclear tests. This really surprised me whenever I learned about it. In 1957, 60% of Americans supported a total ban on all nuclear testing, or at least above-ground nuclear testing. Around that same time, the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission had to admit that nuclear fallout was dangerous and that these tests were producing a noticeable amount of it, further stoking fears. Famous figures started to add their voices to the calls for a test ban, figures like the actual Pope, and chemist Linus Pauling, who organized a petition that got more than 9,000 signatures from prominent scientists, including Albert Einstein. You can see that is Linus Pauling. He did not just write a little letter, like he was a long-time protester against nuclear tests.
Linus Pauling actually had an incredible fucking arc.
Oh yeah.
As that guy jumped way off the fucking rails when it came to advocating for like what was it, massive doses of some sort of vitamin. I don't recall.
I'm not certain.
But like no, Linus Pauling actually like jumped off the fucking rails in the latter part of his years. It was really like quite an impressive crash out. Watson and Crick, I can't remember if it was Watson or Crick who did this, but one of them was just like openly screaming about like advocating for eugenics.
Oh.
Watson and Crick were the two famous, like, you know, quote unquote discoverers of the structure of DNA. Because Rosalind Franklin got like, you know, swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Yeah, now there's this wonderful pattern of like high-powered scientists in the 50s and 60s like completely jumping fucking rails and spouting some of the most deranged bullshit you have ever heard in your entire life.
Well, shit, I'm going to do my best to remember Linus Pauling then as the guy who campaigned against nuclear arms and tried to get a test ban.
I want to clarify, is Linus the guy holding the sign or is he the dude with the beard?
He's the guy holding the sign. That other guy we're about to talk about in a sec.
Got to be Russian.
These protests were also not restricted to the West. 219 Soviet physicists went against strict censorship and publicly signed Pauling's letter calling for the tests to stop. Igor Kurchatov, who you can see in that image there, one of the head scientists behind the Soviet nuclear program, personally begged the Kremlin to call a halt on the tests, which they refused.
Also, that is a fucking beard.
Oh yeah. Guy, you look at that guy and you think that like, oh, this is a Russian scientist from like the 1910s or something. That's him in like 1960. At the same time, the leaders of the US and the USSR, this may be something of them trying to like make themselves look good in kind of in retrospect. They both wrote in their memoirs about how they kind of worried that they had created a monster and how any attempts, like at the time, nuclear testing is incredibly unpopular. The public wants it gone. But on the other hand, they are facing incredible pressure from the military and the military-industrial complex to keep it going. So both of them are trying to find ways to kind of like negotiate it down, but neither the US, the USSR, nor the UK are willing to just say like, we will stop testing. No one is willing to just unilaterally say it. Because they are fighting, like I said, against the momentum of the military-industrial complex and the paranoia, the legendary paranoia of Cold War generals on either side of the Iron Curtain. To them, a ban on tests would be like crippling their ultimate weapons. Like, why would you want to have a worse weapon? They did not give a single shit about the whining of some environmentalists or some peacenik scientists.
Oh boy.
We wind up in this scenario where no country is willing to just say, we will stop tests. They are only willing to do it if everybody else, if their enemies also agree to stop tests.
Yeah, you go first.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, see what happens.
You both have a gun, a square in everyone else's face.
I was imagining this as like a Mexican standoff where everyone's pointing a gun at each other's faces. It's like, all right, put your gun down. No, not unless you do. It's like, all right, well, what if I put mine down? What if we both put ours down on 3? 3, 2, 1. No one put their gun down.
And they're both pointing at it. Yeah.
All right, well, as a show of faith, I am going to take one bullet out of my gun. I want to check that bullet. I want to make sure that bullet's real. And just going back and forth, like, no one can agree on doing this. From 1955 onwards, there are all of these tiny, abortive little attempts, these negotiations to make a test ban, but all of them fall apart over, like, the tiniest little military snags. The Soviets are willing to stop space testing, but they don't want foreign monitoring at their test sites. The Americans want to share a common test, like international nuclear test ground, but they want to make sure that it's within US territory so that they can spy on it. Stuff like that. everyone on paper agrees that we should stop doing these tests, but no one can agree on how to, like, stop this nuclear monster. And all the time, like I said, every single year, it goes from, like, 30 tests to 55 tests to fucking 116 tests or whatever. This is like a snowball rolling. And finally, in 1958, we get something called the Nuclear Test Moratorium. This is basically everybody who has a gun pointed at each other's heads. They have not agreed to lower their guns, but they have agreed to put the safety on for 5 minutes so that they can just kind of like, all right, let's just hash this out. Let's talk about this. We still got the guns pointed if we need to. Let's just...
No, the one gun is still pointed square at the head. The other gun is no longer just, arbitrarily firing.
All right, we have all agreed to aim at each other's big toes. Are we all in agree? Okay, all right. And what this nuclear test moratorium was, it was proposed by Khrushchev, and it was not an official agreement. There was nothing being signed. It was, at best, a handshake agreement to pause everyone's testing for a little while so that real negotiations could be conducted in peace. Something you saw that killed a lot of these earlier negotiations is like, you could argue that this is sabotage. I think there's certainly a case to be made for it. Like, at the same time that Khrushchev is in Geneva trying to negotiate a test ban, the Soviet military will do its biggest test ever and shock the world, and suddenly the negotiations get torpedoed.
Oh, shocker.
This happens back and forth multiple times of, like, just as negotiations are starting to get good, Curtis LeMay is like, drop another 1,000 of them.
Was there a Soviet equivalent of Curtis LeMay?
Okay, so to kind of answer that, there wasn't a direct equivalent because the Soviets never really had much of a bomber force, and on the missile force side, you never really had anyone build up that same kind of, like, to me, Curtis LeMay is important not because he headed SAC, but because of, like, the incredible power and influence that he wielded. Like, people generally can't name any other head of the Strategic Air Command. It's just that, like, LeMay was, he used every single bit of that buffalo. He disobeyed orders from the president, from the military. He just did whatever the fuck he wanted.
He found exactly the nonsense that he could perform.
Yeah.
Without being enough out of line.
And the USSR didn't really do stuff like that. Like, I have no doubt that is for the best, because if the USSR had flown a fleet of bombers clear over the USA, they would have all gotten shot down and started World War III. And what this leads to, like, all of this back and forth, all of this, tit-for-tat nuclear testing, it eventually results in the politicians finally agreeing to a moratorium. They haven't signed anything, but from 1958 until 1961, the US, USSR, and UK conducted 0 tests. Or I should say, from late 1958. That is why whenever you look at that chart, the one that says tests per year, it suddenly drops off a cliff. That's what that little gap is. And you can see that in 1960, there were actually 3 tests in total, but those were French, and France rejected the moratorium. They did not want to, they absolutely did not want to stop testing.
And then everyone else said, I think the fuck not, you trick-ass bitch, and just all of the testing started again.
Well, okay, so we will get to that.
Oh?
See, just because the moratorium held did not mean that progress was not being made on the nuclear side, on the military side, or even on the testing side. Anytime there were negotiations going on that triggered a brief lull in nuclear testing, the labs and military units would just spend that time inventing new weapons to test as soon as the negotiations failed. Which they always did.
Oh, so the definition of come the fuck on, please fail, and then you just have a spate of tests and then nothing.
Yeah, and I cannot stress enough that anytime there's one of these tiny little pauses that doesn't last, they are ready to go as soon as it is done. Like the USSR, whenever they announce, hey, we are, like, this has fallen apart, we're going back to testing, they test within 24 hours. They are ready.
Lacing them up, going, all right, boys.
Everyone has their test itineraries planned out.
Oh yeah, whenever it comes to these tests, underground testing, the tunnels are already pre-dug. Bomber drops, the bombers are loaded in the Pacific. They're already on station. Space tests, the missiles are already assigned. All of this stuff, this institution, they just put the brakes on a little bit. They don't dismantle any of it.
So I'm not familiar with the terminology of all of these test ban treaties. But one thing that springs to mind is what fraction of these are atmospheric versus underground? Like, when did underground testing sort of become the norm?
Entirely in 1963. So what we're going to talk about is that the end result of this story is the partial nuclear test ban treaty. I may be getting that name kind of wrong there. But what that does is that bans any above ground nuclear testing by all signatories. But what that means is that the total number of nuclear tests stays roughly the same. They all just go underground. Prior to that, I know there were some underground tests, but I think there were only like 20 total. You know, above ground or high altitude was very much the way to do it. Because they didn't care about the fallout, and because underground testing means that you can't get as much data.
Well, I mean, critically, one of the advantages to a high altitude nuclear test, right, as opposed to like ground test, not an underground, but like something with laydown delivery or, something emulating laydown or a ground burst, is that you do not get anywhere near as much fallout.
And you can still do big tests because
Well, sort of. You could do a big test, but as we're about to find out, it's a bad idea.
The largest test was, what is this? Grommet Cannikin, 4.8 megatons underground.
Ooh, I must have made a big cave.
Oh, have you seen? There are actual photographs of, I forget which U.S. test range there is.
Oh, yeah.
But you can see this with like all of the craters that have subsided.
Yeah. I was looking at that same thing yesterday, all of these underground test sites where even just like a couple 100 feet apart, you just see all these giant craters in the ground where the nuke has carves a giant spherical cave, and then all the ground above it just collapses. That's why anytime you see a video of an underground test, what happens is a giant circle of dirt just falls. So basically, this moratorium starts in late 1958, but that entire time, both sides are prepping for when they know it will fail. So like all the time, Eisenhower and Khrushchev are trying to negotiate a test ban. The US Air Force was developing Project Pluto, which was a nuclear ramjet cruise missile.
Yeah, we got SLAM!
NASA was working on Project Rover, a nuclear thermal rocket, and preparations were underway for Operation Plowshare, which we know and love as those attempts to we can just build a harbor, just nuke a harbor. Or what Lindsey Graham is proposing we do to the UAE.
I was just say the best part about SLAM was the Tory ramjet series of tests of just, hey, exposed reactor core to the air, let it fire. Just let it rip. Come on, do it.
They did the same shit with the aircraft nuclear propulsion.
Oh yeah.
Program. So I've seen the test stands. I used to live in eastern Idaho, not too far from Idaho National Labs, right, or the National Reactor Testing Station, or maybe it was I think it was before it got folded in or something. It used to be part of Argonne.
Oh, Argonne did some real fucking nonsense.
45 minutes outside of the town that I used to live, you drive out towards the site, what we call INL, right? They had outside of EBR-1. EBR-1 was the experimental breeder reactor 1, right? Which is now a museum. You can tour it. It's only open during the spring. You should go check it out. I did see it. You can stand on top of the core.
Oh no.
Of this reactor. No, and there are parts of it where this you walk into this place and they're just hey, the only rules that we have is that you must wear shoes and also respect the signs. Because the concrete in here definitely is still kind of spicy and contaminated.
Report back, listener. Go check it out for us.
So right outside of EBR-1, though, they have the test stands that they were using for the aircraft nuclear propulsion programs. They're fenced off, and you can see little dosimeter tags and other things like that hanging out on the fences and all the equipment. There's just do not go over that fence. Including the lead-lined locomotive.
Oh, so to get us back into this, while this test moratorium is going on, there is an attempt to negotiate a full test ban, but that does not work out. And the militaries of the world do not have to wait long until they have the opportunity to actually test again. In September of 1961, after more failed negotiations over a test ban, the USSR announced that they would restart their test shots. Also, I'm going to be referring to nuclear tests as shots. That is the terminology that they used. A month later, they detonated the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon and man-made explosion overall in human history. The weapon was designed for a 100 megaton blast, but they were reasonable and they dialed it back to only 50.
Yeah, completely reasonable.
This was still more than 3 times more than the next biggest nuclear weapon.
Wonderful.
Condemnation for the test and the danger that the nuclear fallout might carry was swift. Quote, "The Vatican called the test an insane decision, morally, politically, socially, economically, and humanely deprecable, that had shown the world the true face of communism, reflecting the tension of hatred. The Norwegian parliament, geographically closer than most to the site of the detonation, declared that it showed a cynicism unparalleled in history, while West Germany accused the USSR of ruthlessly risking the health of all mankind."
These motherfuckers didn't see Chernobyl yet.
I'm surprised at how active the Vatican and the Pope are at opposing nuclear tests.
Well, no, they looked at it. They were the only people on the planet who's just like, guys, this is bad news.
Although they also certainly weren't being like neutral in the Cold War, considering that they said that like, this is communism. This is that bomb right there. That just shows you what communists are like.
Yeah, no, it's entirely the communists. It has nothing to do with Western paranoia. This is all the communists' fault.
And the United States also joined in and condemned the tests. They said they were reckless, irresponsible, and a betrayal of the moratorium. And then they said that because of the evil, evil communists, they had no choice but to start their own tests. That they really, really, really didn't want to do, everybody.
Look at what you made us do.
Yes.
Look at what you made us do.
Hundreds of nuclear tests per year. It's like, guys, we just gotta. We got the Soviets forced our hand.
Curtis LeMay is over in the corner.
Drooling.
He is doing the nuclear version of gooning, ready to just start throwing tests.
And the French are just like, wait, we were supposed to stop testing?
No one bothered to send them a French translation of the treaty, so it was like, no,
they're just like, I can't read this shit.
Arrêtez les tests nucléaires? No. Any of our listeners who speak French are going to either find it funny or get really mad that I attributed like a Québécois accent to the French nuclear delegation.
Beautiful. Thank you, Quinn.
And this is also something that you see constantly, like publicly, every one of these countries says that they don't want to be doing these nuclear tests. It's just like they have to. The bad communists, the evil Americans, they're forcing our hands. We have to do this.
Curtis LeMay, though.
So now that I think about it, I do wonder if Curtis LeMay would have actually cared about nuclear tests, because I don't know if he would have been that interested in a nuke that was like 5% more powerful than the last generation, because he had thousands of bombers and thousands of nukes. I feel like he cared more about saturation. So behind the scenes, while everybody is publicly going like, oh, dang, I hate look at what the Soviets made us do. The attitude was not regret, but jubilation. And they were ready to go.
So they were all gooning.
I need to give some more numbers here, but it's just to emphasize how quickly and how hard both sides went as soon as the moratorium ended. The Soviets make this announcement right at the end of August. The first test happens on September 1st, a day later. In the next 14 days, the Soviets conducted 14 more nuclear shots. The first U.S. retaliatory shot was conducted on September 15th, and I believe that was part of Operation Nougat. Nougat? Whatever. Nougat. Okay. These things all have really stupid names.
Except for Buster Jangle.
Oh, yeah, no, that's the most serious one.
And then, in just the last 4 months, so the year is already 2/3 over, the Soviets and the U.S. do a combined 69 nuclear tests.
Nice.
Amazing.
I have this memory. I don't have the picture on hand, but it's of, hotels in Las Vegas like, hey, here are the nuclear tests if you want to watch them. Here's the schedule.
Oh, yeah. Nuclear watch parties were absolutely a thing, especially in Hawaii.
Yeah, they flew a little too close to the sun on that one, didn't they?
In order to catch up, the Americans announced Operation Dominic, a series of nuclear tests that would take place throughout 1962 in the Pacific. Some of these would be tests for new weapon designs, some of them would be to prove the reliability of old designs, and some would be high-altitude shots to just see what happened. Like, what happens if you nuke space? And that is how we finally get to Starfish. So, on top of all of its other goals, Operation Dominic laid out a handful of space-based nuclear tests. These were collectively called Operation Fishbowl, and the individual shots got all kinds of dumb names like Bluegill, Starfish, Checkmate, or Urika. I actually like that name.
Okay, hear me out. The best
Operation Urika 1961.
No, the best names are the ones that are completely just fucking nonsense.
Yeah, Bluegill. Unless that's a fish.
They name them all after fish, and then they name one Checkmate?
Yeah. Well, is Urika a thing? Urraca?
It doesn't matter. Nonsense.
I don't know. You want me to Google that for you live?
It's a bird.
Jamie, Google
Urika is a
Urika.
bird.
Okay, never mind. That's just the Spanish word for magpie.
Yeah.
So the plan for every test shot was basically the same. Each would be launched from Johnston Atoll, a small set of islands controlled by the US military about 700 miles from Hawaii. They'd be lofted by modified US Air Force Thor ballistic missiles, which actually later evolved into the Delta series of launch vehicles, which was flying right up until 2 years ago.
Listeners take note. Every satellite I'm about to discuss came up on one of these things.
And like we talked about, these tests were not to test new weapons. These weren't about actually testing how the warheads worked. It was about seeing what happens if you nuke space. So every one of these tests was also followed by a bunch of sounding rockets packed full of sensors, and they would have tracking planes kind of orbiting the area, all trying to get as much data as possible on the test shot. What set Starfish apart from the rest of Operation Fishbowl, though, was how ludicrously powerful its warhead was. Every other test in Fishbowl was set for around 10 kilotons of TNT, which is still a lot. The earlier Operation Argus shots had only been 1.7 kilotons. Starfish was dialed in at more than 1.4 megatons.
Question.
Yes.
What were so the rest of these Fishbowl shots? What was their terminal altitude? How high did they detonate?
From what I've seen, some of them were 80 kilometers. A couple of them wind up fully going into space, passing the Kármán line. Some of them are strictly high altitude. However, there are other low yield space-based tests. So it's not like the high altitude ones are all 10 kilotons and all of the space ones are in the megaton range. They kind of varied them around a bit.
Because I thought Starfish ultimately detonated, somewhere about 400 kilometers?
Yeah, 250 miles. But it is still, it needs to be mentioned that it is hundreds of times more powerful than most of the other tests that it is being flown with.
Yeah, it's a rounding error, right?
It's high up, so it has to be bigger.
Uh-huh.
Now, the first few attempts at test shots did not go well. Bluegill's rocket went off course and had to be safely destroyed, just in the normal explosion way and not the nuke being triggered way.
Yeah, the range officer going, damn shame. Y'all better find that shot before...
Where was it going off course to?
In most of these cases, it didn't have a chance to fly off towards somewhere. It's just as soon as they lost control of it, they just hit the button.
I see.
Yeah, as opposed to Argus going well, there goes Brazil.
Just, all right, going that way.
What is it, the cruise missile that just accidentally landed in Brazil?
Snark-infested waters, yeah. Man, yeah, every single missile, what if, I don't know for certain, but if Bluegill had just started flying towards Brazil...
Just Brazil is the nuke-attracting territory?
Yeah, the secret nuclear burial grounds.
Yeah, the other strange attractor.
And I believe we have talked about this before. This is a real thing. It is called a range safety officer. So on most places where a rocket or missile is being launched, you have someone whose job is to make sure that the rocket doesn't fall on people, to be the safety officer. And they are normally armed with a kill switch that will detonate the rocket. So you have definitely seen this in Starship tests or other rocket launches where if it goes out of control, they kill it. And that happens with a bunch of these Fishbowl tests. The first Starfish, same problem. They lost tracking, so they hit the kill switch. Because of how things were named, any redo of a test got given Prime. So the next test, the next Starfish test would be Starfish Prime. Yay, it's the title of the episode. And they could keep going, because Bluegill shots would continue to fail over and over. Bluegill Prime exploded on the launch pad.
Now that looks like something bit of funny.
Yeah, that one just detonated on the pad and damaged the pad.
Nice.
And it damaged it so badly they had to pause the test for 3 months.
Wait, what warhead did they have on these? Were these implosion
There was a
devices?
W-49.
W-49.
Yes. Or I believe Bluegill
Sorry,
may
I'm
have
gonna
had
do
a
some-
W-50. It's either a 49 or a 50.
W-49. Hang on, sorry, I gotta look this one up.
That was the main nuclear warhead for American ICBMs at the time, from like 58, I think, to the mid 60s. And Bluegill Double Prime launched fine, but it veered off course again, and the RSO had to put it down.
What Prime Promise final version?
Well, yeah, Triple
Yeah.
Prime did actually fly properly, although it had a much smaller blast than expected. They recorded no EMP, and only 2 soldiers went blind.
Only 2.
Yes, that is something that they measured.
Don't worry, your injury, it's not VA related.
I mean, those guys were basically staring at the sun anyway.
Well, I mean, at least they aren't counting this in terms of number of Japanese fishermen irradiated.
Immolated, yeah.
Yeah, the Himemaru is nowhere near this. Thank God.
And then came Starfish Prime. So the redo, the first time they tried to do Starfish, it failed. And there's not a whole lot to say about the actual execution of this one. After the failure of the first attempt, Prime went off pretty much without a hitch. The Thor lofted its W-49 warhead to an altitude of 250 miles or around 400 kilometers, and at 11 p.m. Hawaii time, July 9th, 1962, the warhead detonated and lit up the sky from Hawaii to New Zealand. Passengers on airliners over the Pacific reported seeing a second sun in the middle of the night, and it was not just a light show.
A second sun? In the
Fine,
middle
well,
of the night?
one that they weren't expecting. Sue me. Quote, "The electromagnetic pulse of the detonation created a massive induced electrical surge in Hawaii's power grid, blowing fuses and instantly darkening about 300 streetlights on the island of Oahu. Burglar alarms were set off and a telephone company microwave link on Kauai was knocked out. So they EMP a state when this thing goes off."
Oh,
3, 2, 1. Crashes your entire power grid.
Well, I mean, you get to see a really cool sight, and people, knew these were published. People knew about these. People didn't like the tests. Like, I can not want the test to happen, but if it's happening, I'm staying up till midnight to watch that thing.
Aurora Borealis?
Of course.
Contained entirely over Hawaii?
making sure that I am blinded so that I can sue the US government.
Why does the air taste like iron?
We fortified the air. It's vitamins. Don't worry
You're
about it.
dead at that point multiple times.
But that is the history of the Starfish Prime shot, the history of Operation Fishbowl, how we got here, and the effects that it had, at least on Hawaii. But, Ian, I was led to believe that it affected a lot more things, because they nuked space, and famously some things are up there.
Yeah, you would think that.
Hello, listener, and welcome to the mid-reel ad. If you enjoy Failure to Launch, more bad space history, and you want to hear more of it more often, there is an option, the FTL Patreon. Signing up at any tier gets you access to monthly bonus episodes and Q&As, and joining an elevated tier gets you even more content, like Chris-narrated minisodes. If that sounds good, you can sign up at www.patreon.com/failure to launch. And now, back to the episode.
All right. So now, Quinn, you get to disrupt me.
Awesome.
All right. So what we're working with here is basically when I first pitched this idea to Quinn, I thought it would be fun to talk about what looked like a dude's rock sort of atomic age fuck up that destroyed the world's proper, like first proper telecommunications satellite, that being Telstar 1. But as I started digging into Starfish Prime and the associated casualties, it became clear to me that the whole story was much more interesting. Basically, Telstar 1 was just one of many notable satellites representing or loaded with first-in-the-world technical achievements, and all of these things got cooked by Starfish Prime. Now, that's not to say that we won't be talking about Telstar 1. It was an incredible technical and arguably social milestone. But there are many other satellites that got killed by this test that are worthy of attention. U.S. military sources identify 9 major casualties as a result of Starfish Prime. It's likely that there were more satellites that were degraded or destroyed as a result of the test, but this is what we have records of. Of these 9, we're going to be talking about 5. Telstar 1, Ariel 1, Alouette 1, Transit 4B, and Track. And I mean, Track is sort of like an accessory satellite to Transit 4B.
And just for context here, listener, 9 satellites. This is 1961. There are not a lot of satellites up on orbit at any one time. This is a substantial portion of every extant satellite in existence being cooked.
2 countries on the planet that could put things into orbit. The US and the USSR.
One of those countries, and I mean, like, I know it's unfair to say one of those countries because it's not like NASA wanted this test to happen. They were likely, and you know, AT&T was not happy about their satellite getting cooked.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Like, as the timeline evolves here, you're going to get a very good idea of just like, they did what?
What kind of fucking nonsense?
Really? Well, I'm going to point to...
Not to mention, some of these satellites, I believe, launched after the test, and they just launched right into a death cloud.
Right in front of my Telstar 1. So, but before we get into casualties, I need to explain a little bit about like exactly how these satellites cook, really, like what the fundamental physical mechanisms are in play here. So, basically the Earth, it has a magnetic field, right? It protects us from a ton of incoming high-energy particles, right? The greatest source of these high-energy particles outside of the Earth itself, in this case, is the sun, right? What we call the solar wind, right? These particles, their composition, their energy, it's super variable. All of them are bad news for anything that has DNA or sensitive electronics.
Chris, that's you.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So, like, the Earth's magnetic field comes from the fact that we have a molten iron-rich core, for varying things. I'm no rockologist or geologist, as they call it these days. But the idea is basically the Earth's magnetic field comes from our molten core. And we get a weak but extensive, very large magnetic field, right, that shields us from these things. So charged particles come zooming in, they interact with magnetic fields, and when they do that, they deflect. Right. This is due to what is called the Lorentz force. I'm not going to get into details of that, but basically any charged particle moving through a magnetic field experiences a force that is perpendicular to both the direction it is traveling and the direction of the magnetic field. Right. Right-hand rule. Consequence of this, though, is basically the Earth's magnetic field tends to trap incoming charged particles in big belts. They're not belts, they're toroids.
Donuts.
If you want to have a look at that, look at slide 10. We have these 2 big bands of charged particles that the Earth's magnetic field traps or produces, right? Which belt you end up in is a consequence of where you're coming from, the energy and nature of the particle. Okay. I'm not going to get into the details. I'm not an expert on these things. Basically, what you have to know is that
they exist and they're there.
Two big death donuts.
Awesome.
Around the world, around the Earth. So when Starfish Prime detonated, it produced an enormous quantity of high-energy charged particles. Electrons, protons, some heavy ions. Most of them are electrons, right? And the way all of these charged particles are produced, there's a whole bunch of different physical processes and nuclear processes that account for what they are, what their energy is, and when they are produced. Basically, what matters most is that what Starfish Prime did is it injected a massive quantity of high-energy electrons into the Van Allen belts. It pumped them.
We have sprinkled the death donuts, is how I'm choosing to interpret this. Put a little bit of sugar in there, put maybe like a jelly filling.
I would say cayenne pepper.
Okay, all right, okay.
But
yeah, something that is adverse to life.
These particles hate you. They hate everyone. The sun is a big ball in the sky that wants to fucking.
What if rocks had an aura, but the aura was purely just fuck off and die?
Yeah, essentially. So
I find that even funnier to consider whenever you know that, like, the sun is basically a teenager in terms of, like, stellar development.
Yeah, it's 10 to the trillion tiny rocks that all hate you and are ops.
And yeah, it's also a sulky teen that hates everyone and didn't ask to be formed in the stellar nursery.
The other critical thing too is that we did not really know shit about the composition of the Van Allen belts at the time.
That's fair.
We didn't really even understand how the ionosphere screws with things that pass through it. The ionosphere is a fickle mistress. That's the polite way of saying it.
Okay.
But for practical purposes, the ionosphere is a bastard. The ionosphere being distinct from the Van Allen radiation belts. That having been said, let's dive into some of the casualties.
Ooh.
So we're going to start with Aerial 1.
Pour one out for the first homie.
Well, okay, let me back up for a second, actually. If you look on slide 11, they talk about the leaky bucket analogy for the Van Allen belts. Namely, there's always...
Yeah, did you make that? That's great.
Yes, I did.
Listener, if you are not watching this on YouTube, if you are listening, what we have here is a meme of like the water pipe pouring into the fat cat's mouth while someone else is trying to, like, you know, a starving dude is trying to catch little droplets, except it's high energy electrons being fed into gluttonous satellites.
The gluttonous satellite.
Fucking hogging all of the particles.
Yeah, no, they had this leaky bucket analogy describing like the nature of the energy introduced into the Van Allen belts and other things like that. Basically, we keep introducing energy into the Van Allen belts, right? And it's always leaking away. Charged particles recombined, they otherwise escape, or, you know, depending upon the mechanism, they...
How charged particles get excited amongst one another is their personal business.
Yeah.
I mean, like this is truly like high energy particle interaction voyeurism. That having been said, let's get on to the casualties. Aerial 1. So this is a very interesting satellite. It's immediately after their...
Okay. Yep.
That's a doohickey. That is
I
a
love the
certifiable doohickey.
Dude, this thing looks steampunk.
We are doohickey maxing.
To me, this thing looks like a copper kettle with some like tubes poking out of it.
So what you're looking at there is actually a model in the Air and Space Museum that was rebuilt from spare parts. The Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. This thing was loaded with instrumentation. So the interesting part is that this satellite was a joint U.S.-UK adventure, venture. The idea basically was that NASA built what we call the satellite bus, and then the UK was responsible for designing. The Brits were responsible for designing all of the experiments that would ride on it. Right? And here in my notes it says physical description thingamajig. Anyway,
The doohickey.
this thing had, so this was a scientific satellite. It launched on the 26th of April, 1962. So that's, again, I'm going to peg to the date, Starfish Prime, June 9th, 1962, right? So keep that date in mind. This thing launched on a Thor, one of the Delta modifications of it. But basically, this was an international collaboration, which was very cool. It's the first time NASA actually did this. NASA built the bus, and then the Brits piled on with experiments. So if you look at this, a lot of the instrumentation on board of the satellite was basically to study the energy composition and distribution of charged particles in the upper atmosphere, or like in the exosphere, right? Like interrogating these Van Allen belts, right? And the cool part is that like it had some other instrumentation on it too. It was looking at, well, there are a lot of cool parts here. But basically, this thing was also measuring cosmic rays, incident X-rays, solar attitude, right? So one thing that you got to understand is that they're doing simultaneous studies on the nature of the environment, the space environment, be it incident radiation, native radiation, right, stuff entrained in Van Allen belts, and then also doing some, other things meant to interrogate sort of the ionosphere as well. So the cool part about the ionosphere is that its properties vary a ton based upon like incident solar radiation, mostly. Well, there are a lot of other factors, but basically it's like solar activity, seasons, even day-night cycles influence the ionosphere. The ionosphere is important, and we'll get into that more later. But the idea is they're just throwing this thing up there, and they're trying to have a look and trying to understand. We did not understand much of anything about the environment space when it comes to the nature of the particles that are floating around and incident ionizing radiation, right? This is super early. Again, this is 62, right? We got no idea. There are two countries on the planet that can throw anything into space, right? So,
and this is quite literally just, how can we throw something out there? Is this even habitable? Can we do anything out here? Just asking the most basic of questions.
It's something that, like, they could not have known. They needed to get sensors up there to confirm, and I'm sure...
This was the 60s. We were stupid back then, so, it's
Couldn't they have just asked Van Allen? He invented the belt.
Okay, buddy.
Van Allen is going to belt you, as we have discovered, as we're about to discuss.
I didn't include it in my section, but there was a great quote from Kennedy whenever he was being asked about the nuclear tests and the resumption of the tests and Starfish and all of that, and like if this would have an effect on the Van Allen belt, and he was basically like, well, I talked to, I can't do the voice good, I talked to Mr. Van Allen, and he owns the belt, and he said it would be fine.
He gave us lease to the belt.
Beautiful.
We gotta get good at impressions.
Nothing
There's a reason
wrong
that
ever
the
happens
Kennedy-
to the Kennedys.
There's a reason that the Kennedy impression is so difficult, and it primarily has to do with
Getting shot.
the attempt to erase, to completely erase his like karmic existence from Samsara when he was assassinated.
Yeah, it's just getting shot. There you go.
Yeah, like
Someone just threw a bottle.
his neck just did that.
Someone threw a battle.
I like your funny particles, Magic Man.
Someone threw a bottle of Ballantines at his head, and it just hit him at the perfect angle.
A Soviet atomic test in space put a very, very, very particularly well-aimed particle beam through his head.
So the neat thing is that the satellite, right, it had been up there since April, right? They do, Starfish Prime occurs on the 9th of July, right?
Yep.
And then about a month later, 12th of July, this thing starts malfunctioning. Now, that having been said, it was still malfunctioning in new and interesting ways. I'll get into sort of the funny bullshit they were up to on this. Well, it was already getting weird with it. This thing was an experimental satellite. Nobody had really built anything like this before. But I mean, that's kind of a running theme. Again, it's the 60s. Basically, this thing starts malfunctioning in July of 1962, and they start getting intermittent contact with it over the course of the next couple of years, and up until about 1964, and then it goes silent, and best we can tell, crashed in, burned up around sometime in 1967. The prevailing thought here is that the solar panels just got eaten alive by all the high energy electrons that were bouncing around up there. Yeah, no, they got the atomic bonk. One of the cool things about the satellite while I was studying it, though, right, was that there's a lot of really detailed discussion of the core functionality of the satellite and its architecture. They talk about the power systems, the command encoders, the transponders, and we get some idea of the design rationale behind this. One component, and Quinn, you brought this up to me, was there's discussion, particularly on the Wikipedia article, about how Starfish Prime. So the satellite was equipped with a quote unquote 1-year timer, right? The rationale behind that was saying like, okay, fine, this thing will kill the transponder after about a year, and it'll free up the spectrum that it was operating on, because it has a transponder on it. And it's still downlinking information, right? And it'll free up the spectrum. You don't have to worry about interference from this satellite. Well, that 1-year timer didn't function. Now, Wikipedia speculates that this was a result of Starfish Prime. I think that's probably a dubious claim. So I sat here, I dug into some of the documents they had here. And the way this 1-year timer worked was very interesting. It was not mechanical. This brings up the hilarious image of just setting an egg timer for 1 year and just good enough, right? Just keying it up there. But this was not a mechanical timer, and this was not an electrical timer per se. This was an electrochemical timer.
Okay.
This is really interesting. So basically, the way they talk about it is that it's a deplating process that stops this timer eventually. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, practically, it's an electrochemical cell in which they're basically intentionally eroding a conductor.
Okay.
Right, because these things sat in line with the main power bus. of this device. They had a conductor coming through, and they had a second set of terminals that are basically meant to electrochemically etch the primary conductor away from this, right? And furthermore, they had two of these things actually. They say that they're in parallel. Electrically speaking, they shouldn't have been in parallel. They were probably in electrical series. The idea would be if one failed, the other one would still ultimately cut the connection.
That is wild. That mechanism, like specifically that mechanism, I've seen some satellites use like mechanical timers. Like if you just like literally just make a clockwork timer set for a year, it can be more reliable than electronic methods because those can get fried. But that is a really interesting way of going about that. Like they just have these terminals etching and kind of like eroding away until it just physically breaks.
Yeah. Basically, they apply a potential. You can think of it like a battery in reverse. Basically, okay. I mean, every battery is an electrochemical cell, but they're not electrolytic cells, right? Same idea as like electroplating materials, right? You'll have one electrode that gets eroded and deposits itself on something else or begins to act upon a plating bathydrop there, but in reverse. So the interesting thing about this, though, is that if I look at I actually went and dug into this report, and they said, like, well, we don't actually know why it failed, but our suspicion is that it just leaked the electrolyte. Right? Oh. It's a wet chemical process, and they probably just leaked all their electrolyte out, is what they were saying. Now, that having been said, I can also believe that maybe Starfish Prime also contributed to the failure of these timers to operate. So one interesting thing is basically all of these satellites, this is the common architecture across these satellites at this time, is basically they all have like an undervoltage lockout circuit. The idea is that when the batteries run low enough, right, they disconnect everything else from the batteries, or disconnect most of everything else from the batteries, right, and allow the solar cells to just charge the batteries up until they get to a certain nominal operating voltage, right? So the issue that you have with the batteries they were using at the time, they're nickel-cadmium cells, NiCad batteries. NiCad batteries are terrible. Not only are they full of cadmium, which is a terrible heavy metal, they're also just kind of an electrical bastard. Okay. You can leave them charged. If you leave a NiCad battery fully charged, it will actually lose capacity. Permanently. They exhibit what we call a memory effect. Like, I don't know if you ran into like early consumer electronics that said like, hey, you got to run your batteries down. Oh yeah, You got to run your batteries down to the entire, like the entire way. You can't always keep them charged. That's NiCad batteries. No other batteries really exist these days that exhibit that effect to an appreciable degree. So I mean, part of this is maybe like, the way these electrochemical cells worked is basically like, because they had this undervoltage lockout and solar cells got damaged. This undervoltage lockout was probably tripping repeatedly. And so it means that they weren't burning these electrochemical fuses down, basically. That having been said, it also seems likely that the electrolyte just leaked out of these things. Now, the other really cool thing that these satellites had is they had this weird dual telemetry system. So do we know what telemetry is?
It's data.
Yeah, it's data. It's about like operational configuration of the satellite, how it's doing. And in this case, telemetry is rolled up with the signals from the instruments that they have on board these things, because it's a satellite. It's a scientific satellite, right? Okay. So they had this really fun dual telemetry system. So they had their standard real-time telemetry system, and then they also had this really fun low-speed one, which is a low-speed data recorder operating on basically just magnetic tape, like a tape recorder inside of a hermetically sealed envelope. Wow. Which is some just Rube Goldberg bonkers shit. In fact, they ran into significant issues with this low-speed telemetry system, because the only command that the satellite would accept was basically like, hey, play back the low-speed telemetry. That was it. Otherwise, it was just constantly blasting data down at its standard high speed. Now, the funniest part that I ran into when I was paging through these documents in the satellite was talking about the integration process. They talk in detail about the integration process. There's one really funny anecdote. There are a couple of really funny anecdotes, but they start with like January 1961. The integration group was formed, beginning with one engineer and one technician.
Awesome. Incredible.
This is on the
Hell
NASA
yeah.
side. So you can imagine just like one engineer and one guy standing there who's just like, this is your job now. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. What am I looking at? 6 months later, they added 2 engineers and a summer intern.
Awesome. Throw the co-op kid at it. Let's go.
The summer
No,
intern
that's
is
essentially
here.
what they did.
He's gonna wish himself the worst of times.
Hey, you're building satellites now. What? And then they had other really fun anecdotes, so they had this entire thing stood up, right? They had the UK experiment, like the UK's experiments came over, right? They had it all slotted in. They did the first like plugs in test of the thing, and immediately all of the experiments blew all their fuses. Like they plugged the thing in and everything died.
Blows all of my fuses in a fit of joy.
I mean, like I feel it. I feel them. I feel them so much. I'm usually on the other side. Basically, it was just like it's just plugging in and just everything dies immediately, and they're just like. Oh.
Then you get the post-mortem of, who did this?
You got like one engineer who immediately breaks out into a cold sweat. Somebody who leaves the room and just like anxiety vomits.
The intern's right there. Like that is what an intern is. An intern is a blade of shielding for the rest of the team.
No, listen, the door's locked. The engineer intern has already been blamed. They're getting trussed up like the lamb they are.
Their dilemma, they use UK voltage instead of US
Everyone
voltage.
knows
where the
that US
occurred.
has special electricity that doesn't work on anything else.
No, that's funny. But they had like other recommendations. They were talking about testing, like they built the wiring harnesses out of like PVC insulation, which is a weird little edge case. But they threw the thing into a vac test chamber, and it immediately started outgassing and just fogged up all of the like
fun fact
viewports
there.
in the test chamber from it outgassing stuff. They're just like, all right, Alouette 1. Basically, this was the first Canadian satellite.
Woo!
The direct quote that I had from Johnny Jackson, who was a NASA official, who said, "The Alouette is as complex as any satellite launched by the United States." That's a hell of a claim. I didn't believe it at first. I looked into it this more. Holy hell.
Then you learned Canadian engineering, and I will note right here, you're about to educate me more on something that I have had like nationalistic pride for since I was a
Also,
kid.
hey, other Canadians, that is a French name.
Yeah, Canadian name is what it is. But like, crucially for Canada, this has always been this thing of like the UK was the third country to operate a satellite because NASA built the satellite for them. Whereas Alouette 1 makes Canada the third country to build and operate a satellite.
NASA didn't build this.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The fun part.
NASA built the satellite for the UK, Canada built Alouette 1.
Okay, that's actually fucking...
Although both of them were
That's good.
launched by the US.
So Alouette 1 was interesting because it seems like they were piggybacking on the same sort of program, or were interested in the same sort of program that resulted in Ariel 1. And then it's very clear that it seems to be clear to me that the Canadians had very different design objectives, and they were incompatible with what NASA was trying to do.
So NASA was offering them a standardized satellite bus, and the Canadian scientists wanted something that could not fit it.
So the interesting part about Alouette 1 is that it's a high-powered ionospheric sounding satellite. So you will run into this, a lot of like characterizing the ionosphere before the launch of Alouette 1 was limited to ground-based stations and sounding rockets, right? This is something that we still do, by the way.
Okay.
There are still ionospheric sounding stations. What is ionospheric sounding? The idea is that you have a transmitter and a receiver, frequently co-located, and you send a chirp. Right, you probe the ionosphere with signals, and you listen to how the signals that come back.
You're doing radar, you're doing sonar on the ionosphere with these chirps, correct?
Yeah, sort of. It looks more like radar, but the receivers are looking for different things, right? So Alouette 1 was remarkable. So when you need to when you're performing ionospheric sounding operations, you have very specific requirements when it comes to the shape of your pulses and the frequencies that they cover, the idea, the interesting thing with Alouette 1 is that because you can put a satellite up there, you're not limited by ground-based stations and their capabilities. Alouette 1 was interesting because you could transmit signals from above the ionosphere and through it to different ground stations.
Okay.
So this offered a different picture of the ionosphere compared to traditional ground-based sounding methods.
So up until then, everything had been from below pointed up, and this was a potential to have both the high and the low.
Right. So the cool thing about Alouette 1 is that it could also receive the signals that it was transmitting, and it would operate in concert with ground stations who could dispatch and send. It had a very sophisticated command and control system that would allow ground stations or other things like that to actually communicate with it and say, hey, I need this when you're coming overhead, and this is what I'm interested in studying.
They had all the input-output of a ground station in space and could coordinate it. That's neat.
Hell yeah.
So they get data from Alouette from what it heard, while they were also listening on the ground. And so they could correlate the two measurements, which produced a much more complete picture of the ionosphere than they had been able to. But this had a bunch of fundamental physical and electrical constraints that were very different from what NASA was willing to support. They had a very, very interesting method of deploying antennas from this thing. So if you look at Alouette 1, you'll see there are two different pictures of this. The one on the left is a model of Alouette 1. The one on the right actually shows the sounding antennas deployed. They had a really interesting system by which they actually had like these steel, kind of like a tape measure, but instead of deploying a single straight curved element, they actually had like these spooled up antennas inside that would deploy from a reel that would coil automatically and produce like a solid antenna boom. Because the problem with the frequencies that they were operating at are much lower frequencies than the ones that you usually use to communicate. And generally speaking, you need a larger antenna to be able to efficiently operate and use the lower frequencies that they were operating from, which is fascinating.
It's really fascinating as well because having worked on a couple of student satellite projects and seen some older like CubeSats and whatnot, you can literally make a satellite with a tape measure as an antenna. But this one, yeah, you mentioned that this takes the flat spool and like coils it into a tube.
It is a spool that then extends an entire antenna.
Wow.
And this is impractical because you can't fold the rigid ones up reliably and still have it fit within the fairings of the launch vehicle.
Also, listener, to put this in your head, this thing looks like it looks like a disco ball covered in solar panels. It looks like a sci-fi Timbit.
Okay, they could actually make money off that.
Yeah.
So this was really cool, but this has the unique advantage of not necessarily being a casualty. This is one of the few satellites that actually tanked Starfish Prime with minimal issues.
Wait, so did it dodge it or like?
Oh no! It took it right in the face and continued operating. U.S. military reports called the satellite overbuilt, and I'd say no, it was not overbuilt. It survived.
Scoreboard, motherfucker.
Overbuilt my ass. Sounds like it wasn't overbuilt if it was the only one that didn't eat shit, eh?
If you know, was that like it being radiation hardened because it was meant to be studying and flying through the ionosphere, or
not flying through the ionosphere? No, they employed extremely conservative margins for designing the satellite.
Gotcha.
So the one quote that I would pull from the technical from the document is, in effect, what Canadian engineers were told this. Build a miniature electronic laboratory you can blast in the Earth's upper atmosphere on top of a rocket, which will then do 4 different kinds of sophisticated scientific measurements in an environment full of almost unknown hazards. Build it to work at least a year, and you won't get much time to think about it either.
Awesome.
Quinn, I love how you immediately jumped on it like did it survive because of specifications, or was it just built correctly? Or was it just built very well? As the Canadian pride thing is did it survive because Canadians built it?
And the answer was yes.
No, this satellite was just built like a brick shithouse.
I would be interested in that with any satellite. I'm a little bit more invested in this one. I will also admit some part of it coming down to aesthetics. Ariel 1 literally looks steampunk. And I'm personally not a fan of, like, in the early 60s, NASA had NASA satellite design leaned heavily towards these spin-stabilized satellites that I never really liked the look of. They're the ones that all have like the solar panels on these weird kind of crooked arms.
Alouette 1 was spin stabilized.
Yeah, but
too.
that one didn't look stupid. I just established that aesthetics were a major part of this.
And also noted Canadian nationalist
Oh,
on
hey,
chat.
DRDC.
So the thing that they did is, the thing that resulted in its survival is that they built their power systems to incredibly conservative margins. Solar panels are, again, and this is a recurring theme, they get eaten alive by Starfish Prime in every single study that we look at. And you can't really shield a solar panel, right? So you add a bunch of radiation shielding to a solar panel, you know what it's suddenly really bad at doing?
Being a solar panel.
Yes, you're shielding it from light.
Yeah, just fucking like Swiss cheesed by this thing.
This was Jesus, motherfucker.
It was built to super conservative margins because the peak power of the transmitters that they were using on this thing, you have to be able to punch through the ionosphere, which is a real pain in the ass.
Okay.
So they overbuilt their power systems. Well, not overbuilt. They had heavily built power systems to deal with the peak demands of the transmitter, the high powered pulse transmitters they were using. Like this is like 100-watt transmitter.
So it would not be operating consistently, but whenever they needed it, they would drain the batteries to like fire a beam through the ionosphere.
Sort of. They never actually drain the batteries, and a lot of these satellites are designed to never drain their batteries because they're using shit batteries by modern standards. But the biggest thing here is the demand, like the instantaneous power demand of these things is absolutely enormous.
Okay.
On Alouette 1 specifically. So they built this thing to deal with some really horrible electrical requirements, and as a result, it ended up being able to operate. It did, what was it, 5 years.
Wow.
Didn't fail for 5 years. Didn't fail until 1967.
And they said it was expected to last a year, correct? Or at least that's what was in the quote.
Hoping
of like
they were hoping it would last at least a year, and it lasted much longer.
And I looked this up, and it launched on my birthday, September 29.
Oh,
yay!
Oh.
One more reason for me to be biased.
It also probably benefited a little bit from sort of like not being up in the air at the peak of the excitation. That,
not like Telstar 1.
We're gonna get there.
Oh.
So yeah, that's Alouette 1. Alouette 1, rock solid. Good things. Canadians did a great job. And said, NASA can shove it.
Chris, as you aren't cheering.
Did you not hear me woo?
I have no leg to stand on.
Yeah, you know your place.
Moving right along. Transit 4B. This satellite is remarkable. It's the great granddaddy of GPS. It is one of the family of the first what we call a GNSS satellite, a global navigation satellite system. So this was a product of the United States Naval Research Lab. They actually did all of the pioneering work on what we call, again, GNSS systems. The interesting thing about this thing is basically it was meant to go up, and it was meant to basically perform sort of navigation trials. Anybody care to hazard a guess about what you might want to have a better idea of where it is?
Submarines, ships, cruise missiles, aircraft, just about
anything
that
Navy constitutes a major armament of the U.S. Armed Forces.
Where Jim Bob 47 is in the middle of the Nevada desert.
Submarines.
A shocker.
So this was explicitly meant to basically provide course corrections. So submarines relied entirely upon inertial navigation systems. The problem with inertial navigation systems, they accumulate error over time.
Yeah, time and distance are their biggest just foes.
Okay.
So the idea was that basically we put a satellite up there, and by broadcast or by transmitting on certain known frequencies, right, with extreme stability, right, you got to remember that there's very little margin for time errors on these devices, right? Light travels about a foot in a nanosecond.
Okay.
Right, in a billionth of a second. So you have very precise timing requirements.
What I'm thinking is you can beam down the location of those ships, or you can beam down something with a known orbit. They can then establish a known location, and then they will know how to launch their missiles from there.
So this was meant for long-term course corrections of submarines. But yes, generally speaking, the idea is that these things relied upon Doppler shift. The idea is you have a satellite up here hauling ass. You end up with shifts in frequency depending upon the relative difference in velocity between your transmitter and your receiver. And by backing out, you can use that Doppler shift to back out, and not only the magnitude of the shift, but the rate at which that shift is changing to figure out where you are in relation to your satellite, if you have an idea of where that satellite is or should be. So this thing was fascinating. This thing is the great granddaddy of GPS. The other fun, remarkable thing about this satellite is that it had an RTG on board.
Hey, one of my favorites.
Okay.
So Transit 4A, so we're talking about 4B here, but 4A actually was the first satellite with an RTG. Quinn, you were telling me about the SNAP program, right? Systems for Nuclear Auxiliary Propulsion?
Yeah.
Or Nuclear Auxiliary Power. The SNAP program is interesting because, they had a number of ground-based ones too, right? All of the odd numbers, though, were the spaceborne ones, right? So SNAP 3 is interesting. This thing only had an output of, so on 4B, it was a 3-watt power output. On 4A, it was 2.5 watts.
Also, just making sure I'm remembering, an RTG is that, like, low-powered, lasts forever nuclear reactor.
Radioisotope thermoelectric generator. Basically, the rock that always keeps itself hot.
Anytime you have a temperature gradient, so like hot and cold, like an icy hot patch could technically do this. You can get a little bit of trickle charge electricity off of that. So RTGs, they're not actual nuclear reactors. I've made that mistake once or twice in this show.
I mean, they're technically nuclear. They're just fissioning extremely slow.
Yeah, but they're not driving turbines or anything like that. They are basically trickle charging purely off of the fact that the rock is warm.
Yeah, they're just making your skin a little bit crispy.
So what they exploit fundamentally the fact that anytime you have depends upon the exact element issue, or depends upon exactly how you're harvesting the energy from these things. But something as simple as a thermocouple, which is just a junction of two dissimilar metals, they develop a voltage and therefore a current across them, which is much less sophisticated than something like a Peltier element, which is actually a semiconductor device. The early ones were just straight up just junctions between two different metals that would develop that. But in the presence of heat, they do that. It's how a thermocouple works.
Okay.
So the interesting part, though, is this satellite, so they called it a RIPS back then, a radioisotope power supply, not an RTG, radioisotope thermal generator. The interesting part, though, is that the RTG on this thing died before Starfish Prime.
Oh.
Huh.
Yeah, died June 6th, as opposed to the July 9th test.
Did the satellite have other means of powering itself once the RTG died?
Yeah, it mostly relied upon solar power, actually. The RTG was there as a backup and also as an experiment in its own right. So its solar panels then got eaten.
3 days later, so the RTG dies on the 6th of June. Or wait, sorry, no, about a month later, the solar panels just get fucking shredded.
Basically, yes. And it was in it was in a pretty damn near perfect orbit for that to happen. So that got cooked. The crazy part is this thing came back to life 5 years later.
Ooh.
Okay.
How?
Right? This is the wild part. One of the ground stations 5 years later, a ground station in South Africa in Johannesburg, picked this thing up. It was still up there. So it's the world's first radioactive zombie satellite.
Awesome.
That's actually a good one.
Listener, that is actually a thing. Like, zombie satellites are a thing. Occasionally, a satellite that has been dead for like 20 years will just come online for a little while. Or even for years. There have been satellites that have died during integration. Like, they get into space, they're getting set up, they die immediately, and then they come back to life like 15 years later.
Yeah, it just suddenly catches enough power to actually, trip its circuits and go, hey, I'm here.
All right, guys, let's do the mission.
Let's do the mission, bullet a hole square in the middle of the head.
The other fun part is that the satellite had a child.
Yay!
Ooh.
that also got killed by
No.
something.
Hey! Dead children!
Why would you play with my heart like that?
No, dead children. We all caps here.
First dead baby in space. Let's go.
So piggybacking on Transit 4B is another satellite that I'd like to talk about. It was called TRAC, TRAAC, the Transit Research and Altitude
You
Control.
can't put "and" in the acronym. Fuck that. It would still be track if they got rid of the "and."
Trinac?
You could
There
just
you
keep
go.
it as TRA. Fine, whatever. Sue me.
TRAQC.
Dude,
I
military
hate.
acronyms.
I know, but
No, it is time for me to say it again because I think I said it in a previous episode. Patriot is a backronym.
oh, the missile. Okay, I didn't even know that was an acronym. I thought that was just a name.
No. It is supposed to be phased array. What is it? Phased array tracking radar intercept onto target.
Oh yeah. No, that's obviously a bullshit backronym. But yeah, that's my dumb complaint about track and its name aside.
Anyway, let's talk about TRAC, the child of Transit 4B. TRAC is very interesting. It hitched a ride on Transit 4B. It was actually like piggybacking on it.
Okay.
Transit 4A, the predecessor, actually had 2 satellites piggybacking on it. There's 3 satellites in a trench coat.
Oh.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, it didn't work. Both of the baby satellites hopped off of it, and then they failed to separate from one another. So they scaled their ambitions back a little bit, and so they launched TRAC. TRAC was neat, particularly because it was loaded with all sorts of instrumentation for exploring the Van Allen radiation belts, specifically the inner belt. Because again, we didn't know anything about them. Really, we didn't have instrumentation up there. The other fun thing that it had was a gravitational gradient stabilization boom.
Oh.
Basically, this little satellite that's a couple of feet across had spooled up in it a 60-foot boom.
Jesus fucking Christ. I've heard about these things. These are super cool. I wish we used them more.
Yeah, so it had like I wasn't actually able to find much data on like precisely how this thing worked. I can keep digging if anybody's super curious.
Basically, like orbital mechanics wise, having this really long boom out the back can help with attitude determination and control, which is the space acronym for knowing which way you're pointing. So nowadays we would use things like, you would use stuff like magnetorquers, you would use reaction wheels, or you could just use like reaction control thrusters, just the little like puff jets. But with a tiny enough satellite, you can just throw a big fuck off boom out the back, and by like manipulating it, you can change which way your satellite is pointed.
I don't fully understand the precise mechanics in play here, but the idea is that when you have a satellite with an exceptional ratio of
Girth and
diameter
length.
or width to length,
Ooh.
yes.
It sounds like it swims like a fish.
No, so the idea is that if you have it, like it tends to orient the long axis normal to the Earth. So the idea is that just by like just sticking your arm out, basically you will tend to point downward,
Okay.
right towards it, or your arm will tend to point downward, which is a fascinating concept that I don't understand, that I don't really understand. The other fun part about this thing is that it picked up horrible interference, and they had trouble talking with this thing because Transit 4B was blasting on the same frequency for its ranging applications.
Oh.
But anyway, the boom didn't deploy, it jammed, the motor jammed. Whoops.
Wait, so every one of these baby satellites so far has failed in one way or another. So the previous 2 on Transit 4A just failed to deploy completely. This one did deploy, but then the boom didn't work.
Correct. Well, this one also had a bunch of other instrumentation meant for studying the Van Allen belts.
Oh, so not a
It had
total
whole bunch
failure.
of particle detectors and other things. Oh no, by no means. And it had a whole bunch of other sensors related to like gravitational sensors and other things,
Okay.
and magnetometers that just weren't necessary. It was basically meant to augment, or is meant as a backup plan in case some of the instrumentation on Transit 4B failed. But it did. 4B worked, so they didn't need those sensors. Anyway, anybody care to guess how this thing died?
Badly.
Starfish.
It was eaten. The giant monstrous starfish came and ate it too.
Solar cells, eaten alive.
Poor baby.
It couldn't provide anything. Damn.
We are now, what is it?
3 for 4
on solar cells. solar cells
Well, I
getting
mean,
murdered.
you did say that that Alouette 1 also suffered some pretty bad solar cell damage.
So Alouette 1, the solar cell degradation, the degradation of the solar cells was in line with the worst case estimates for solar cell degradation. It was still within the design envelope.
Is what allowed Alouette 1 to survive just the fact that they covered it in so much solar panels that even if everything's at, like, I don't know, 20% effectiveness, it could still power the sat?
Well, yeah, so Alouette 1, they specifically assumed a 40% degradation in solar cell output over the entire operational lifetime of the
Gotcha.
satellite. And they hit about that
Very quickly.
thanks to Starfish. Yes, much faster
All right,
than
so
anticipated.
like we've talked about Starfish killing these satellites, but now that it's being put in these terms, I can only imagine this as being like drinking from the wrong grail, but for a satellite. Like Starfish is not like blasting them and they die immediately, unless we have examples of that.
No.
It's just it's effectively aging their hardware incredibly quickly.
Right.
Because they're still like solar panels still get shredded in space in general, because space is generally a radioactive hellhole.
Going to the orbit that makes you old.
Yes, we're just like and Alouette 1.
M. Night Shyamalan's The Orbit.
I'm going up and I am loving the fucking giant loving plasma cannon pointed square at my face for every hour of the day.
Just and like this baby was aged to death very quickly, I guess. Oh no.
Yes, essentially.
It had the Benjamin Button experience in reverse, so it just had the regular
The
eat shit
reverse
and die.
Benjamin Button experience.
Yeah, it had reverse Benjamin Button's disease.
Whoa.
Reverse Benjamin Button. Neglect by
Yeah.
neglect by the US Air Force?
Satellite infant death syndrome, is that a thing?
Sudden satellite infant death syndrome?
shaken satellite syndrome.
Was it Sentinel-1? I just start spinning and act like I don't know nobody.
Well, Quinn, that would be more aptly like shaken payload syndrome,
fair,
right?
fair. Quick question on the dead baby.
Yeah.
Do we have info?
Sure.
We have info on when the baby died?
Yes. The baby died. Oh, fuck. Hang on, wait. No, I don't actually have data on when the baby died.
So what you're saying is there's a chance.
I mean, well, no, you do have that its solar cells were eaten. I was just wondering if we had anything on the...
Yes, actually, I'm certain we do. One moment, please. Let me just consult the archives of Johns Hopkins. We do everything, apparently. Medical research and satellites. 270 days.
Oh,
So 9 months after... Oh, my God.
Oh, come on.
9 months. Died as long as it took to gestate.
yeah, sudden infant satellite syndrome.
Oh my god, that rules. Well, you know, baby got a bit of a life. You know, like satellites back then weren't exactly lasting for like
The baby
decades.
be dying, yo.
No, I mean, satellites there don't last particularly long if you hit them in the face with ionizing radiation repeatedly.
Yeah, they get hit with a bag of
Putting it in the as Chris so aptly pointed out, the orbit that makes you old.
My favorite part. Sorry, backing up to Aerial 1. My favorite part is that both of the particle detectors on it just died immediately upon launch.
Well, I mean, like that would have helped them. They couldn't maneuver the satellite. All the particle detectors would have responded is just yes. How much?
high.
Too much.
Yeah, sure, mate.
Yeah, in a posh
Muffled
accent.
screaming.
How many particles? Many.
Many.
All of them.
3.
That's the funny part, because I didn't actually dig into any of the data because like every single satellite I have mentioned so far, by the way, still has radiation detectors on it. Like every satellite that I have mentioned.
Oh yeah.
Was loaded with the same like basic package of instrumentation when it came to detecting like alpha, beta, gamma, X-rays, heavy ions. Like they all had detectors for the same stuff because we didn't know what was up there.
And even then, that is like a fairly common loadout of basic sensors even today. You know, like satellite buses, a standardized satellite bus for like a telecoms satellite will still come with basic like what is the radiation environment that I am operating in, kind of stuff, because that is relevant to keeping the satellite alive.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting though, because I never actually dug into like looking at what the actual like reports and counts were. I assumed that they were also all just like, yes. All right.
Radiation
Telstar.
detected. We did it, everybody.
All right. Telstar 1. It has a song. The satellite has a song. Telstar. Have a look at that one. Wow. It looks a lot like Alouette.
Big old disco ball with solar panels.
Yeah, the carcinization of satellites.
Also, the first Chinese satellite looks a lot like that. Dongfang Hong 1.
Well, you know why? You don't have to worry about the direction of pointing your solar
That is
cell.
fair. No risk of them winding up in the shadow.
I do love these spheroid satellites, though. They're really nice looking.
So, Telstar 1 is the most fiendishly complicated satellite that we have talked about. Like, this thing incorporated multiple bleeding edge, like complete, like not only bespoke, because every satellite was bespoke at the time, but like actual bleeding edge technology. And it didn't even last a year.
Awesome.
Like, I could do an entire episode on Telstar 1. It is nothing short of completely groundbreaking. And in fact, it's what I wanted to make most of my contribution to this episode about. So Telstar 1 was a really interesting sort of public-private partnership is the easiest way to explain it, or is the naive way to explain it. The best thing, the way I would explain it is AT&T shoved 50 to 100, tens of millions of dollars in R&D for this thing. And then NASA said, like, yeah, it's going to be another, like, 3 to 6 mil to launch this. So pony up.
Okay.
Also, we want rights to any inventions that come from this thing.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Okay, because that is a wild term for what, that is a wild inclusion for what is otherwise basically a standard launch contract of you build the satellite, we launch it.
Well, where else were they going to go at the time?
The Soviet Union's right fucking there.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, yeah, this is before NASA was really in the commercial contracting. Contracted launches were not really a thing back then.
When was NASA? NASA was established in what, 58, 59?
Just about, yeah. I can't remember exactly which, but yeah, that region.
So this is like 3 years later that they launched this thing, which was already in development for years before that.
And you mentioned earlier, this is the one that launches literally the day after Starfish, right?
Yeah. Rode its way in orbit on a Thor Delta on July 10th.
Like how the dateline works and what, like, so basically like 24 hours later, they're just flying into the death ray at its peak.
Guys, what
Sure
the fuck
did.
is up here? And then they just hit the roughest road known to humanity.
You can imagine like them launching it and then a bunch of engineers getting a report going like, they did what?
running towards the pad, waving my hands desperately as the rocket starts to lift off. Like, no!
Again, really? Right in front of my Telstar 1?
Well, the U.S. Armed Forces have basically set up not just a, spike strip. They have a check hedgehog, a minefield, everything else known to man is just, come on up. It's right here.
No, it's fine.
Space
I
is
promise.
fine. Come on.
Nah, it's cool.
You're a capitalist, right?
Trust me.
Say you can hang out with that old baby over there.
Reports of the enormous artificial aurora over Hawaii have been greatly exaggerated.
And if anyone in Hawaii still had working phones, they could tell you that.
Like, I mean, I'm going to be honest. This is like potentially the worst timing
Oh, yeah.
of any scientific endeavor.
Oh, yeah. And especially like you mentioned this thing, I'm sure some part of me even wants to go like, oh, it's AT&T. It's like a TV. It's like a comms thing. Who really cares that much? But the amount of bleeding edge tech you're describing in this thing and the fact that it is the first basically private launch ever, or contracted launch at least, pretty fucking significant that it immediately rode into a death cloud.
It's the first MechWarrior Comstar launch, for all intents and purposes.
Well, I mean, so like that's the fun thing is everybody else like launched and did their stuff and like, yeah, maybe they had it, maybe they, realized that like what had happened. And it's like, okay, fine, we have margins to account for this, or well, shit, we're in this far.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just like we gotta go. Whereas this one was just like immediately riding on the coattails of the single most like energetic event
in Leo history.
Well, I mean, like, so you got to understand, right? They didn't just pump tens of millions of dollars into developing this satellite. The ground infrastructure that they needed for this thing was immense too.
Like tracking stations and whatnot?
Yeah, so they built an enormous installation in Andover, Maine. This thing had a horn antenna that was 177 feet long, weighed 380 tons, had an effective aperture of about 3,600 square feet, and was fed by a 2-kilowatt transmitter.
What the fuck?
This entire installation that they built in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, Maine, sucked down like 0.5 megawatt of power to operate all of its infrastructure. That is both, and that is like tracking, that is primary antenna, that is all of the other cooling infrastructure you needed. This is the 165-foot diameter radome.
That's fucking wild.
Or sorry, 185-foot radome they built around the thing, including all of the de-icing systems, cooling, heating.
This is, I think we've all seen the post before of, Soviet radars really look like post-apocalyptic megastructures.
See,
this is the American example.
See, I'm just imagining this as like the myth of consensual watching TV, and it's like I consent, Curtis LeMay, I don't.
What, Curtis LeMay
LeMay doesn't want you watching TV tonight, actually.
No, Curtis LeMay has already sent a bomber to your house, but it's already, just set 3 of its engines on fire and it's actively crashing.
The first public demonstration of this thing was actually a broadcast with JFK, like addressing Europe, right?
The man who ordered this satellite's death.
Well, I don't know if he ordered it. I think he was saying JFK is talking too much peace. Curtis LeMay's like, cut the feed. We're done here.
Yeah. Fucking hate this guy. Yeah, just launch another one. More nukes. I mean, as soon as he figured out, as soon as this precedent is set, I'm sure that like Curtis LeMay and people at SAC were thinking like, oh, people got mad at us, but we also probably fried some Soviet sats. Let's keep this in our back pockets.
Well, so that's the interesting thing. I can't find any records of any Soviet satellites getting cooked by this thing.
Do you mind if I throw a very, very brief interjection here on the Soviet side?
Do it.
They were worried about people, is one thing that the Soviets were worried about, because Andriy Nikolaev was supposed to fly, I believe, on Vostok 5, but they were constantly needling the Americans like, hey, can you give us, like, more accurate, can we confirm our particle readings with your particle readings? Because they seem kind of high and we don't want Andrian to get cooked. And the Americans, NASA just kind of kept telling them like, yeah, it's fine. Watch, we're about to launch a Mercury guy into it.
They did.
No. And the Soviets also avoided it whenever they launched Nikolaev.
Yeah, no, it delayed, I messaged you.
Was it a Gemini or it would have been Mercury.
It was one of the Mercury missions. Wally Schirra had his flight massively or significantly delayed by this. And then like going back on going back on this, they were somebody said, yeah, if we'd have launched somebody I think from the Air Force said like, yeah, if we'd have launched him, he would have been cooked.
Wally Schirra just coming back down 40 years older.
Yeah, the reverse Benjamin Button, he just aged really fast.
The reverse Benjamin Button is so stupid that I'll allow it.
Whoa, wouldn't that be wild? What if Benjamin Button aged backwards?
Telstar 1 was just absolutely insane, though. Like, nobody had attempted to do anything. Like, so there have been 2 attempts at satellite, like proper satellite communications or telecommunications before this.
Okay.
One of them was a program called SCORE, signal communication by orbiting relay equipment. I didn't look into that one too much, but it was basically like a barely orbital flight of nothing. It didn't even deploy a vehicle. It was essentially just like,
okay, so like something that was meant to be very temporary, basically just like shoot it over the ground station, see if you can track it. It's not coming back around for a second go.
No, it came around a few times, but it didn't orbit
Okay.
that much. I didn't look too much into score. But my favorite other attempt at them attempting telecommunication, or satellite communications, was Echo. Echo, they launched, look at slide
I'm
24.
guessing this is a backronym.
No, it's not. It's just, literally what they did is they echoed signals off of this. But they did the sphere.
And is that a balloon?
No, it's a giant aluminum sphere.
And did they launch that? Like, is it just sitting there? Like, how do they?
I didn't actually look into the launch parameters of this thing too much.
It has to have been inflated in orbit.
This is where I'm showing my lack of like not looking into this. I think it's rigid. Oh no, it's not.
There is no way.
No, it's a giant aluminum sphere.
Okay.
Yes, aluminized
and that's
sphere.
just something that they just pointed signals at and bounced them off.
Bounce them off of it. Yeah, it didn't work so well.
Well, I mean, yeah, like if it's a mirror, but you're trying to bounce it off of a spherical mirror, like if you're not hitting it exactly right, like perfectly, it's just going to go bouncing off and deflect.
I guess the last thing I want to say about Telstar 1 is death.
Oh, no.
It didn't get its solar arrays.
Oh.
Horribly. I mean, they definitely got damaged. The most vexing fault was actually in the command system. So 1 month later, they start seeing intermittent malfunctions with the command system. It stops responding to commands on occasion.
Okay.
Right, but otherwise it's fine. It's just like, okay, fine, it didn't respond. Let's just retransmit it. Oh, okay, it's fine. Right. August 7th. So less than a month, less than a month after launch. And specifically what it stopped responding to was a diagnostic command that they would send basically to shut down one of the two decoders for the telemetry commands. That's fine. They find a workaround, and then it gets worse.
Okay.
Middle of November, it keeps responding to commands, but it takes like 10 minutes for it to respond. So that's a problem because it historically had always responded essentially instantaneously. And then it stops responding to commands about a week later. So they figured out what they did is they were just like, what the hell is going on here? Right. Well, they actually had planned they actually had planned to harden the system against radiation. They did tests on the ground, actually assuming that it would, encounter pernicious radiation. But they planned for a radiation environment with a dose rate that was about 1/100th of what it actually experienced.
Huh.
Yeah, that was about my reaction.
R.I.P. little homie. You got fucking
So,
fried.
So Telstar got its brain fried, is what you're saying?
Well, it actually had like a very small part of its brain fried. So here's the cool part. So they started, and you can actually see that they actually detailed their entire like troubleshooting process and their assumptions in these NASA docs. Basically, what they figured out by taking a replica of the command decoders and intentionally irradiating them on the ground, they found a fault in one very specific set of transistors inside of the command decoder. And then they figured out a workaround.
Okay.
That was the cool part. They realized by modifying the commands that they were sending in a certain way, and I'm not going to get into details of that, but by sending modified commands, they could actually get it to respond. So they brought it back to life after a lot of struggling. And at the end of December of 1962. Seemed to be fun.
This is the second time that they have discovered a workaround in order to keep this thing working. Because the first time you mentioned around like November 18th, and then it has died completely, and now they have brought it back.
Yeah, so they figured out, so then they managed to bring it back with a set of intensively modified commands. It's fine for about 2 weeks. Powered up, they noticed some anomalies. Actually, they managed to spool up the transmitter again. And then it completely dies a month and a half later.
Okay, so just like being on the team for this satellite, as soon as it launches, you think you have something incredible, and then it just turns into, 4 months of intense debugging as every single day you come in, like full ups and downs. You develop this incredible Apollo 13-esque way of saving this satellite, and then it continues to die because all of this is happening. All of these rescue attempts are happening while it is plowing through the orbit that makes you old.
The orbit that makes you...
I can claim no credit for that one.
Essentially.
And then it gets satellite dementia and then doesn't come back
it
one
hitting
day.
a very specific part. Like, we've got radiation-induced lobotomy in this satellite. We have found a way to work around it, and now the overall dementia has set in.
We have crashed it straight into Florida.
right into the villages. It belongs. It's wearing a little Hawaiian shirt.
it has actually not changed anything from the brain rot already present.
If there were any satellite to crash into Florida, it would be Alouette 1, the one with the Quebecois name. It's even round like a snowbird.
There it is. Present your case.
Yeah, no, I think that tracks. I think that's all I need to say about that.
We had to have Operation Morning Light take place in Northern Territories and not Florida.
Tragic. Radioactive alligators? Come on.
Radioactive zombie alligator satellites that make you old.
All right. Well, now what I want to do is I want to make a stalker setting. It's happening in the Everglades, and the thing at the center of the zone, the like in a night
is Telstar 1.
Is Telstar 1, which has gained sentience. It is like it's like V'ger from Star Trek, except it's Quebecois.
Yes!
So we have the anomalous Quebecois sentient satellite at the center of the zone, annihilation style, and
a Quebecois nationalist satellite.
A team is sent in. Yes.
No, just the Quebecois nationalist satellite. That's it.
Yeah. You are not allowed in La République des Everglades. I don't know what the fuck the Everglades would be in French. Who knows? La République de Floride.
Annihilation, but the thing that is warping and reflecting.
Making the state of fucking Florida French. They will just either immediately die or assimilate. There is no middle.
Annihilation.
Yeah.
Annihilation or stalker, but it's just the zone that makes you get a swap.
The Quebecois stalker is created.
So, like, is it fair to say that's kind of like the death of Telstar 1? That, like, it dies in late February, and they are not able to get it back?
Yes.
Dang.
Damn.
I want to add something at the end. I want to do like a quick little legacy thing, as well as something else I found that you, Chris, just reminded me of.
You
Don't worry.
No, I'm gonna worry explicitly because you said don't worry.
So, coming back to the history of high-altitude nuclear tests, in the end, negotiations did pay off, but at a high cost. 1962 saw the largest number of nuclear tests ever conducted in a year. 178 of them. Basically one every 2 days.
What the fuck?
Hell yeah!
But what we got out of it was the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, signed by the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom, banning all of them from any above-ground nuclear tests. Yes. Now, as we already talked about, France didn't give a shit, China didn't give a shit, Israel, South Africa, India, Pakistan, no one gave a shit at first.
Do you want the big assholes fighting again?
But at the end of the day, whenever you consider the number of nuclear tests that were being done, like, any of those other countries were basically drops in the bucket compared to the US and the USSR. They were the ones that did, like, 95% of all nuclear testing ever, so them putting their stuff underground meant that there was a big, like, it's obviously still bad to do nuclear testing. These areas are still heavily contaminated, but it being underground is intrinsically better than it being shotgunned into the jet stream, or just on the ground. And while researching this, I found something very fun, specifically not while researching Starfish Prime, but while researching the larger trend of Operation Fishbowl, this series of high-altitude and space-based nuclear tests, which it has an entire mythology. It has an entire alternate history if you're in the flat Earth community.
Oh no.
Please. I'm cooked on this episode now.
and we will cover this more in the future because there is so much to cover. I could not do it justice right here, right now. But and there's like different factions within the flat Earth community on what Operation Fishbowl was. Some of them, the ones who believe in the firmament, believe that it was an attempt to break through the firmament, firing a nuke into the heavenly shield over the flat Earth to crack it, and that they failed. However, non-firmament believers hold up Operation Fishbowl as the government attempting to debunk the firmament. Because they believe that the government knows that the world is flat and that they are having the same debate over whether the firmament is there or not. So they thought that, like, this entire test was being done to prove or disprove the heavenly shield over the flat Earth. And you can see it on the slide there. Slide 7, they hit something. This is a whole thing.
I have a much simpler explanation. Curtis LeMay was trying to kill God.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it was actually real. No, he is actually just trying to kill God.
Yeah. There's a great Onion headline from way back when of like NASA completes mission of finding killing God.
Of course the fucking flat earthers are involved in this.
Yeah. But that's the thing that's so interesting to me. Like, they have taken... People know about Starfish Prime. No one gives a shit about Operation Fishbowl. Operation Fishbowl is just the kind of umbrella that contained Starfish Prime. But Operation Fishbowl specifically, the Flat Earthers are very interested in. If you look up Operation Fishbowl stuff, a big chunk of what you will find is debate among Flat Earthers about whether or not Operation Fishbowl is good for their beliefs or bad for their beliefs. And most of them tend to think that it proves, like, they think that the rocket and the nuke just hit something up there.
You know what we should have done? We should have given Mad Mike Hughes a tactical nuke.
Mad Mike Starfish shot? Hell yeah. Listen, Mike, this is the only way.
Just handing Mad Mike a Davy Crockett and going, have
I don't want to
it.
laugh about it too much because, like, his friends really did try and stop him, but his friend having a dream from God telling Mike not to fly could be interpreted as God trying to protect himself. Of like, no, please do not let him anywhere near me with that W-49 atomic warhead that he found. So yeah, Ian, thank you so much for coming on this episode. Thank you for bringing your prep. Thank you for researching the flat Earth for us.
I hate you so much. Thank you for having me.
More honestly, thank you for reaffirming Canadian engineering prowess and perfection. Thank you for teaching me about dead babies in space. Thank you for teaching me about the satellite that televised a JFK.
Telstar 1 relaying the JFK.
It's the assassination tape. Like, it broadcasts that, and then the satellite just instantly dies.
The satellite gets JFK'd itself.
JFK is watching that, like, he's watching the future video of him getting shot that's come down from the satellite.
Nothing wrong ever happens to my satellites.
They're seeing this future televised him getting shot in the head. The Alouette 1 in the Quebecois Alouette 1 has warped time to make this, like, come back to the past. Mr. President, this is written in history now. You have to ride the convertible.
You know what? Honestly, if the motherfuckers at Bell Labs were capable of doing anything at that time, it would be unintentionally inventing a precognitive radio frequency
Tell
device.
me if Andriy Nikolaev or Wally Schirra had not been launched into space and then irradiated by a rogue nuclear space test, that is superpower origin-y as fuck.
Yeah, you get the Fantastic Two.
Yeah. Dude, like, Soviet American Cold War Fantastic 2 would rule.
Bonded in friendship. And mass quantities of ionizing radiation.
Physically merged at the hip now, don't you know?
Their superpowers, they get together to do quaaludes, and
I'm sorry, that was meant to be heartfelt and it went right back into riffing, but no, seriously, thank you guys very much for having me on.
As much as I'm being a salty little bitch right now, it has actually been very cool to learn about.
But, listener, our brains are melting, your brain's probably melting. Thank you so much for listening to this episode.
Melt together with us on the Patreon.
Don't send your baby to the orbit that makes it old. And until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Thank you to everyone who have signed up to support the show, and a big shout out to all of our top tier patrons. Our cyborg cats are Alex K, Asha Rin, Boss, Kataiga Reptile, Charlie, Comrade Sleepy Bro, Daniel F, Graham E, Jesslyn T, Jorg 2, Building My Rockets in Achtetatis Hrabahase Hereds Haprordias, Joss, Kamo, Lane of the Wired, Matt, Mobius Striptease, Murray Motorsports, Mysterious Stranger, Oil Drum, Pat, Halsey, Rare Scrungles Fingus 3rd Edition, Skylab Bricks, Source Force, Spectre Cohen, The Mass of Grey Goo, formerly known as Wingsmith, Tortilla Baron, Vivek D, and What's the Character Limit for a Patreon name anyway? Our space dogs are a Union Thug, A. Blinkham, Agent Carter, Alex S., Alexander the OK, Alice N., Alan N., An American Robin, Angie, Angry Old Man, Yada Yada, Anthony C., Argent Blue, Arlen S., Atomic Hobbit, Autofox, Avocado Assassin, Baron M., Batday, Ben L., By Barbarian, Big Meg, Binary Badger, Labilius Blix, Beamy, Bod Bogey, Boomzilla, Boring Brian, Booge, C. Cantaloupe Was Taken, Celebgill, Chainsaw Snuggling, Charles H., Charlotte M., Chris K., Christian K., Clay M., Cole C., Captain Lag, Cynical Scribble, Daddy Bongo, Darth Baby, David L., DeSmiley, Dom K., Drain Damage, Dr. Shockmaster, Duke of New York, Ank, Aaron, Eric J., FBH, Flatbread Shrimp, Fractal Moonlight, Furious Luddite, Garrett B., George B., Grant K., Griffin, former snow shoveler of Burger King, Heiko S., Howl's Moving Pictures by Rush, Human Post-Fuel Soup. I heard Stephen Miller is a pedophile. Isn't that crazy? I hope you have a good day. Ian R., Iggy Noranis, JMM, James A., James C., James T., Jamie K., Jarl Breadmaker, Jerry M., Jedediah D., Joan of Bark, John C., John E., John Boy D., Johnny Terrors, Jonathan G., Jonathan W., Just Morse, Kate B., Kate D., Corbin the Dog, Cruzzy, Lenswipe, Liliana, Lorgath, Luke O., Alexins PC, Majestic Affect, Man Who Is Average, Mar, Marigold Muskrat, Marto, Maxwell B., Mech Girl Alley, Michael, Michelin Star Blemtro, Mish, Mr. Dr. John, Mitch P., Newman Instrumentality Project, Nellie W., New Name, Nicholas S., Nick S., Nolan B., Norman W., Northeast Driver, NSFW NSA, Outlook Cove, Panda, Pat S., PB, Poopbutt, Randall, Ray H., RBK, Rato B., Riley, Robert G., Sailor of Fortune, Scott K., Sean F., Sean H., Sensual Kazoo, Sean P., Shetty Hengst, Silly Vixen, Skyhawk, Something, Spirit of Thunder, Starborn in the Sky, Starlight Foxalope, Throne Ahone wants to say thanks to Chris, Swanee, The Best Sean, Thomas M., Tim P., Toasty Ken, Trashed, Verash T., Brisk, William O., William P., Winston P., Wouter S., Zachary JB, Zaf, Zemo, Zim, and Zombie Dwarf. Albert Count, 231. Thank you for listening to another episode of Failure to Launch. If you want to follow us, we are Failure to Launch on Blue Sky and FT Launch Pod on Instagram. We also post our episodes with visual aids at Failure to Launch Podcast on YouTube. FTL intro and outro themes were provided by DJ Danarchy.